it's hard to say these things without saying, gee, how good I am, I did this. But as a matter of fact, demography is a scientific field. It's a technical field that means you've got to do a lot more about calculus than you ever wanted to. It means that you have to, I spent a postdoc year at Princeton with all these guys. I sat there with my PhD in history, and I sat in a big room where the seminar was taking place, the postdoc seminar with a National Science Foundation thing. And the man said, go around the room and said, tell about your background. And the background of the people, I was at the end, and I'm listening, oh, I have a PhD in mathematical economics. Oh, I have a PhD in statistics. Oh, and they go on and they get to me and, history? Kind of thing. So it's a very difficult technical field. It has to be worked on that way. And then you have to do the Ottoman language and everything of that nature. So that means that I was probably the first one to ever do it. Simply because no one had really considered that kind of thing. And surely no one had thought that they should, after working for 8 years, it takes a long time to get a PhD in Ottoman history, that they should then go on and try to study something technical and learn how to be a computer programmer. That was probably more. And so I was probably the first one to do it. Now there are people who have claims, although usually this isn't too contentious, really. I mean, people don't usually take too much. Where the really numbers come is Armenian, Kurdish, Turkish, all that. Those numbers people have a fit because they demonstrate that there was no Armenia. That the majority of people were Turks and Kurds. And the statistics are pretty uncontrovertible, but people don't want to accept that. Whereas with this, it's not quite as much a complaint. Although the book that I wrote on it, the first copy of the book called that I wrote on this period in the time, the first copy was sold to the Greek embassy, so I have a feeling they were interested. Anyone else, please?
You indicated that.
Yeah, I can use that because I can talk loud, but my ears are old, I'm afraid.
Well, I can scream, but I'd rather not. You indicated that during the Balkan Wars, the Montenegro, Serbs, Bulgarians, and Greeks all wanted the same parts of the Ottoman Empire, but they pretended that they were united until the war ended. I heard some time back that for a while, about a year or two, there was a united country combining all of those people who rebelled against the Ottoman Empire, but it got dismantled after a year.
Well, not a country, but before the Balkan Wars, there was something set up with the Russian guidance called the Balkan League.
Oh.
And that was not a country, though. It was an alliance among these particular countries you just mentioned.
But that didn't last.
There never was a country like that, no. I mean, please.
The wounds of the Second Balkan War were very fresh when World War I broke out. In your research, have you come across any statements by Ottoman leaders that indicate that their sensibilities were deadened by the Balkan Wars when they started to deal with the Armenian problem in the east with the Russians coming in? Have you found any connection, or is it just obvious that would be such a recent wound that it would affect?
I mean, when you say sensitivity deadened, that sounds a little tricky because it sounds like you're saying that they suddenly became murderers because they were murdered. And no, I don't think that's the case, but I do think, I mean, I don't know that they had sensitivities to begin with. I can only study what they did, not how they felt. But no, I think you can say, however, that what happened to the Muslim population gave them reason to believe that if it happened again, that terrible things would happen to the Muslim population again. And if you want to know whether they were more concerned with the Muslim population, yeah, sure. People are always more concerned with their own, not question. When the First World War, even slightly before it broke out in November of 1914 for the Ottomans, the Armenian revolutionary groups, Komitadji groups, like the ones that had been in the Balkans, were active in the Van province and to a certain extent in other provinces. The same stuff seems to be repeating itself. So I would be very amazed if they didn't start to worry when that went on. And undoubtedly that was the proximate, that and just the seizure of the city of Van and all kinds of other things. I mean, I have a whole book on it I can recommend to you. But that caused them to relocate the Armenians. question. So the Balkan Wars does have that effect, yeah. But as to what was in Enver Pasha's mind, God only knows. I'm not sure even God knows what's in his mind. Never been my favorite. I love Mustafa Kemal and Enver. Okay, someone else, please.
How is it that there remained a sizable...
Wait for the microphone, please.
Okay.
How is it that there remained a sizable Muslim population in Bosnia?
Oh, in Bosnia?
Yeah.
Well, of course, Bosnia, there were hundreds of thousands that left. But because the Austrians were a lot nicer to live with than the other people. I mean, the Austrians had reason, once they had taken over, they had reason to try to be decent to the Muslims because they wanted to have a population that was against the Serbs. So that's part of it. Also, I think Austrians are just nicer than a lot of these other people. They treated, I mean, it's just the way it was. You know, there's a lot to be said for the Austrians in terms of the way they ran their empire. They didn't do as, you know, I wouldn't have done it. I would have taken over Bosnia and such. It wasn't theirs to take. But at the same time, I think you've got to compare it to what happened in the other places. But in all these countries, except Montenegro, well, Montenegro and the Niš area and the Dobruja, but in Bulgaria, in Macedonia, obviously in Western Thrace, there were still sizable Muslim populations. You couldn't get rid of all of them. And there still are, to say, I mean, in Bulgaria, still a reasonably large, I mean, nothing like what it was, but still a large number of Turks that are even today more and more becoming integrated into the political system, which they surely weren't before. Anyone else? Yes.
Yeah, was the Ottoman government able to mount any organized, was the Ottoman government ever able to mount any organized government, any organized plan or movement to assist in the movement of the refugees? I noticed on your map, you know, you've got those big areas toward Izmir and so forth. But was the government able to do anything, or did the people just sort of...
they were. It, of course, is a long, you know, you have to go through individual things. They were able to help on railroad lines. They were able to help with having soldier units stay behind to try to protect the people while they left. This also is incidentally true in World War I, too. The Ottomans had to leave large units behind, and they should have been fighting the Russians in order to protect the local people in the East. So the same kind of thing happened. The biggest thing that happened was the organization of flotillas of boats to go to Salonika and get the people off. Every kind of old junk boat you can imagine. The son of the Khedive of Egypt sent his personal yacht. There was all kinds of things, because in order to move hundreds of thousands of people, you had to have simply a kind of merchant marine that didn't exist. So everything. I mean, Latins say a little Tsao's going and such, everything you can think of. But when it comes down to whether the Ottomans were organized enough to really deal with it, no. I mean, they didn't have the money, they didn't have the troops, they didn't have the police, they didn't have the, you know, you name it down the line. But I want to see one thing. Let's say this, you know, how often have you ever heard the Turks praised for what they've done in taking in refugees? Very, very few countries in the history of man have been so open and so giving to refugees. Way back in the 1860s with the Circassians, the Apazians. In the 1870s with Turks and with Laz that came from the Balkans. With all the people we're talking about here, with today. Huh? What do they owe the Syrians? Nothing. What do they owe the Kurds that they took in? Nothing. They do it out of charity. Yeah. Now when you think about Turks, and you think about the prejudices about Turks, do the words charity and love of your fellow man often come up? But indeed, that's what's happened. Right? I know that's a little dramatic. Yes.
I do want to recommend everybody else in the audience a book on Don, the Meaning and Revolt at Don.
Yes.
Marvelous book. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and especially in light of the scholarship. One of the interesting things that you point out there was the influence of American, particularly Protestant evangelicals in wanting to promote Christianity in the Ottoman Empire. at the time leading up to World War II. They are a strong involvement with the Armenian revolutionaries from the 1870s on. I was wondering, to what extent did American Christianity play any indirect role in the Balkan Wars?
Of course, another gigantic question. That primary influence was not on the ground as much as it was in Eastern Anatolia, which is what you're talking about in Van. Primary influence was, strangely enough, the training of leaders. The Bulgarian government, after the 1870-78 time, the Bulgarian government gave a first-class award to the head of Robert College.
Yes.
But they did, because they had trained so many of the people that became the leaders of the new Bulgaria. And so that kind of thing is there. There is a large amount of missionary reporting that takes place that does influence the reporting that's seen in the West. That's more in the early 1900s in the problems in Macedonia, which we won't go into now. But I would say that the effect of missionaries in the Balkans is not nearly as great as the effect that they have in Eastern Anatolia. Doesn't mean it's not there, but also it must say there are many fewer missionaries, because when the Orthodox Christian countries like Serbia, Romania, Bulgaria, Greece, these are all Orthodox Christian countries. They don't like Protestant missionaries at all. Right? I mean, they make Catholics look like they have affection for the Protestants. You know? Anyone else? We can all go and eat now?
I want to interrupt, if I may, and say I believe there are still maps in the back. The maps that are on the table in the back are free for the taking. Please do take them. You'll spend a long time looking at where the arrows go and what the numbers are, but they're wonderful maps. You won't find anyplace else. So please do take them. Please do not take the books.
It's been a real pleasure talking to you. Thank you.